Everybody here works hard, they pay their taxes, they take care of their community and fill the gaps. Because we learn really quick when 2/3 of West Virginians live in places forgotten by time and ignored by politicians, that the only people that you can count on is each other. And I don't believe that any of them are for West Virginians, which comes back to that we are always the extraction colony. All of our national forests, all of our, even our state or national parks, even our state parks, they all have something wonderful to offer. Called One National Forest, the mother of all rivers, because it feeds like 12 watersheds into the Ohio and the Chesapeake Bay. And I just thought, wow.
Spending time outdoors isn't about escaping life. It's about remembering where we fit. Here, we honor the traditions that shape us, revere the life around us, care for the land beneath us, and connect to the world and the people around us. Because at the end of the day, we're all standing on the same ground. This is the ground between us.
Just a couple quick things before we get into the episode today. First of all, my guest, Stephanie Tomara, was a Democratic candidate for U.S. House District 2. She unfortunately lost that race. A very narrow race, I might add. She lost by about 700 votes this past Tuesday, May 12th. So she will not be representing the Democrats in the election in November. Nevertheless, I thought this was a great conversation and one that was worth sharing. Secondly, I did have some technical issues at the end of this interview. The call dropped kind of abruptly at the very end. So this podcast does kind of end out of nowhere. So with all that being said, please enjoy the show, and thank you so much for watching and listening.
Hi, y'all. Welcome to The Ground Between Us, the podcast where nature connects us all. I am Eli, your host, and my guest today is Stephanie Tomana, Democratic candidate for U.S. House of Representatives in West Virginia District 2 and middle school science teacher. How are you today, Stephanie?
I'm good. How are you, Eli?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. So I usually like to start with just a couple quick rapid-fire questions just to get to know you a little bit. Before I do that, I just want to say to the people listening, if you enjoy my show, if you enjoy this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen to it, like it, give it a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple, do all those things. I really appreciate it, and it really helps me out. So with that being said, being a teacher, as you are, who was a teacher who made a difference in your life?
Wow, I don't think I could nail down any one teacher. Obviously, my science teachers, Mrs. Bowers, Mrs. Stanton, they were both amazing teachers in their own right. And I was blessed to not only have them as my regular teachers when I was a student, but also as mentor teachers when I was becoming a teacher. If I had to pick, I really don't know. There's so many wonderful teachers that I had, Miss Mullinax, Mr. Wolf, but probably the most ineffable impact of any teacher would have been my cousin Nelson, who was a math teacher. He not only carried all of us through high school math and upper level math, but also college math, and just an amazing legacy. We had this little tiny family scholarship that he, coordinated and made sure some of the brightest kids with the most need had a little bit of money to start college with. It was in memory of our grandfather, but he saw that for through more than 40 years of his teaching experience. And when times got tough, he even sold water bottles in his classroom to fund the scholarship. He was just probably the kindest human you would ever have met. And I don't know how familiar you are with the historic teacher shortage in West Virginia, but we have a lot of unfilled positions. And he was one of those retired teachers that went back into the classroom to fill the gap and ultimately ended up passing away there. And since his passing, I mean, just you see how much people across the country, reached out and donated to that scholarship fund in his memory after his passing. It was just amazing. We're now a full-fledged 501c3 scholarship foundation.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. It has been probably one of my greatest joys to build that program, and not only in honor of our grandparents and our great-grandparents and all those who came before us in the Elliott family. I mean, they really instilled this sense of community that we all have. But also in his honor, I take a lot of pride in carrying that torch with my cousins.
Yeah, that's amazing. My mom is a teacher, so she teaches special needs preschool actually, but I have a ton of respect
Oh.
teachers. And we the the district I go to was, or I went to rather, was a district in Ohio called Shadyside, and there's a teacher there. He's still teaching. His name's Vince Thornburg, so shout out to Mr. Thornburg. But he's just an incredibly brilliant man. Like, could be doing way more impressive things on paper than teaching high school chemistry, and I think he teaches chemistry, physics. When I went there, he taught engineering too. I think he teaches an organic chemistry class now.
Oh, wow, he's hitting all of it.
Yeah, my senior year, I had 6 of my 8 classes with him. Um, but I mean, I don't know. I personally know probably a dozen people who are in the STEM fields directly because of him, and I would guess that it would have to be in the hundreds. So, um, one good teacher can make all the difference in the world for sure.
Amen. I really, I hope that there are kids that look back and say those wonderful things about me.
I'm sure they will. So, do you have a favorite piece of public land in West Virginia?
Oh, wow. I don't know. The New River Gorge, maybe Mon National Forest, Harper's Ferry. We're outdoorsy. I tell people that some of my greatest adventures were raising my kids in West Virginia. So we could probably just pick one. Any of them would be wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really underrated state when it comes to natural beauty for sure.
We spend a lot of time at like Valley Falls,
Mm.
State Park, and Cooper's Rock, another state park, but I don't know. Gosh, that's a really hard question. I've
We
had
went
like media day all day, and that's like the second hardest question I've been asked. I can't pick a favorite.
We went to Valley Falls,
Mm.
I don't know, a month or 2 ago, and we'd never been there before, and it was really cool. We had just got a new dog, so we already had one dog, and my mom came with us and my niece. So we put the dog in the car, but we didn't tell mom which dog. And then we got there and got a new dog out of the car, and it was very funny. But it was really cool. We took my niece down to the river, and like we were playing around on the rocks and stuff, and it was really cool to watch her. Like, she was really scared and timid at first. And then by the end, she's like bouncing around the rocks, and I'm like pushing her up rock faces and stuff. It was really cool to see how playing outside in that way built her confidence.
How old is your niece?
7 or 8, I think. I should know that. I think she's 7.
That's a really great age. I miss that age with my little ones, but I do have the opportunity to do a little bit of respite care for foster care and the little girls about that age.
Yeah.
It's a fun age.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have 3 siblings who they're all siblings with each other, but they're all adopted. So, I'm kind of familiar with that side of things too. And respite care is not easy, and thank you for doing that for all of us.
It's you know what it's our honor. It really is.
So let's start with some of the issues affecting the state in particular, and then we'll work out to sort of some of the other national issues that I think also affect West Virginia, but maybe are a little less immediate. So, what do you think are the most important environmental or outdoor issues facing the state right now?
Water. For me, it just comes down to water. Not only do we have I don't know, an incredible amount of people. I think it's 64,000 people without access to clean drinking water. And then it's more than 3,000 boil water advisories last year. We just went through a spell where we couldn't drink our water for several days. Or, you know, when you look at the southern coal fields, they can't even bathe or wash their laundry in their water. I know that some of our state, if not all of our state, has struggled with drought. And then now we're, moving full steam ahead to data centers that are the glory with being 20 years behind everybody else is that we see what data centers can do to our water tables. In Northern Virginia, they've actually had places where the water is running dry. I think protecting the water has to be one of our most vital, most pressing things that we do right now. And we have already just tons and tons of waterways that are polluted with PFAS that, never really fully recovered from acid mine drainage. Like we need to protect the water. Every living cell in your body, every living organism needs water, and it's just a tragedy what we're doing to it.
Yeah, I agree. And um one thing I like to bring up is I don't think that people who maybe live in other parts of the state and have never visited the coal fields understand how bad it is down there. And like there's plenty of great people, and it's nothing about the people themselves, but there are a lot of people that are living in really rough conditions, and there are a lot of places where their sewage is still straight piped into the stream. Like you can't like that doesn't even occur to people that is even
Mm.
still a thing, but there's a lot of places where even something as basic as a sewage system isn't installed yet.
There are places here in north central West Virginia where it's piped straight into the stream. And I know this because we kayak a lot, and we don't kayak those creeks or streams anymore. But it's, I don't think people realize the other problem that we, don't talk enough about is the infrastructure that's failing in plain sight. I live in an unincorporated community in the middle of Marion County. I always tell people our claim to fame is that we were Consolidation Coal Company's model coal town. Everything was built around in this valley around where the tipple used to be, but it was completely self-sustaining. Those days are long gone, and there is no source of revenue really to replace it. When the mines sell these little towns, most of them set up little, they call them improvement associations, which is like a board of directors to do the business of the town. And everybody contributes different amounts of money. In the town down the street, it's $10 a month to every resident. Well, there's only 200 houses. How far does that go?
Mhm.
And here it's $20 a month. Same deal, 200 houses. How far does that go? You have to maintain the drains. You have to maintain all of those things. We had a sewage crisis that took 15 years in a lawsuit to rectify. And now 5 minutes down the road, their sewage infrastructure is failing. It's running into their streets and into their homes and into the river that feeds the other river that down the road we're getting water out of. Like, these are all important. Everything is just so intertwined and multidimensional. And I don't know that we talk about it enough. And I don't know that we really think about it enough.
Yeah, I agree. And then, like with West Virginia, so much of our economy is dependent on, well, I shouldn't say our. I live in Ohio, but I was born in West Virginia. I lived there till I was 5, and then we moved over here. My whole family's from West Virginia. I've hunted and fished in West Virginia my whole life. I talk about this all the time on the show, but I got when we still lived over there, my parents or my grandparents, I still haven't figured out who it was for sure. They bought me a lifetime hunting, fishing, trout stamp at 13 months old. So that's been such an amazing gift because I have resident privileges in West Virginia for my entire life. But I say that to say that it's very important to me because it's where I'm from, and it's where I spend the majority of my time outdoors.
That's good fishing too.
Yes. Well, exactly. And that brings me to my point. Like, so much of the economy is built on top of the waterways themselves, outdoor recreation, kayaking, fishing, tubing, whatever. And also all that tourism that is going to generate is contingent on having sustainable infrastructure. Like, no one wants to go stay at an Airbnb or a hotel where there's brown water coming out of the tap, or, your sewage is going out a pipe 10 feet from the back of the building. So that's not to downplay the residents themselves in any ways, but some people tend to think of things only in dollar signs. And I try to make that connection every once in a while. Like, even if you just try to point out the economic repercussions of these things.
Tourism. Oh, sorry. Tourism accounts for 1 out of every 15 jobs in this state.
Mm,
It's close to a $10 billion investment in our economy. And you're right, conservation is economic development. It doesn't make sense. Beyond that, and this is something that I do not ever waver on. I've lived here my whole life, and I know that we are good people. Everybody here works hard, they pay their taxes, they take care of their community and fill the gaps, because we learn really quick when 2/3 of West Virginians live in places forgotten by time and ignored by politicians, that the only people that you can count on is each other. I mean, we collectively, everyone, I don't care, Democrat, Republican, Independent, we deserve better. We have all been working and caring for our communities. And, it just shows the lack of real meaningful infrastructure investment by our legislature and our congressional delegation. It just kind of sends a message we're not important. After all these years, if we can't, we paid into our tax burden and we can't have clean water, why? We can't have roads with drains. I mean, I don't know if you saw all of the flooding that we had last spring, but a lot of it, not only do we have these narrow valleys and these flooding incidents will, as these heavy rains from things like climate change increase, those we're going to see more flooding, and the drainage infrastructure isn't designed to keep up with it. Like most of our drains are over 100 years old. Can you imagine how much these communities have grown in 100 years?
Yeah. Well,
But sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I live, I don't know, not more than a few miles from where all that flooding happened on Wheeling Creek was that a year or 2 years ago? Either way.
Actually, it was, I think it was 1 and 2 years ago.
Yeah. Where literally people's whole homes were picked up and moved down the creek. And, once again, this circles back to conservation because for work, I've been in that creek doing sampling and different measurements and things before. And it's in the riparian areas are in awful shape. It's all either just like straight up flood wall or, really badly eroded and steep banks. And, if you look at things like riparian recovery, that may just seem like tree hugger stuff or like why, but all of those things help, riparian zones and riparian plants and stuff help that water infiltrate, help slow down the flow of that water, and all help control flooding. So these things all come together and then have these impacts downstream. So as you were saying before, everything's so intertwined that these conversations get a little bit confusing because you got to talk about everything.
You do, and that's like with legislation. It just seems like there's a lot of things that we have created this false dichotomy with. Like if you're environmental, then you're anti-fossil fuels. If you're, I'll give my daughter's boyfriend is from Ohio. We tease him a lot. If you're pro Ohio, then you're anti West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
He's our favorite Buckeye, we tell him. But like there's this kind of false dichotomy, and we say tree hugger stuff, but it's very important. We are all dependent upon on this environment. We plant trees so that we don't have, the hillsides cave in. We plant trees so we understand like these are all important niches. I'm a beekeeper, and I say an accidental beekeeper. A girl mentions one time she wants to try beekeeping, and then some bees show up at her house. But it was the first year was kind of all right. They lived. I was excited. But the second year, my neighbors dredged out this kind of freshwater pond or pool, they call it. And once they dredged that out and they planted their vegetation, I mean, my bees thrived. I had to split hives because, they had a really great water source. Not that I wasn't providing a water source, but when you have a freshwater source fed by a spring that's 70 by 30, I mean, and with all the vegetation that the little bee wants. But, it's just that like little things like that have such a big kind of rollout. And I wish more people recognized it.
Yeah, I agree completely. So what would you do when you're elected, what will you do to sort of fix these things around water and protect it going forward?
One thing that's really important to me is kind of twofold, and it actually both centers around Congresswoman Miller, who isn't even my congresswoman, but she sponsored two pieces of different legislation. One was the Ohio River reclamation, kind of like they did down in the Chesapeake Bay to clean up the Ohio River. We have a lot of industry like DuPont that has really essentially poisoned the water with PFAS. But at the same time, there's no really regulation. It just reads like, hey, we want you to clean this up. I would put some bite to that. Like these companies that have polluted this ground and this watershed, there needs to be responsibility. If you think about it, I read this quote today, and it called the Mon National River, or the Mon National Forest, the mother of all rivers, because it feeds like 12 watersheds into the Ohio and the Chesapeake Bay. And I just thought, wow, at the same time, some of that's like the most polluted water there is. So we do have a responsibility. But I would put some bite to that legislation. And the other thing that I'm personally have at stake with, down the road in our county seat of Fairmont is an old brine facility. I don't know how much you know about the brine water from
A little bit.
fracking.
Fracking, Brian, I know more about. I work a little in oil and gas, but yeah.
So you know it's comes out of the earth naturally radioactive from the processes. Well, this company had all of these above ground storage ponds and tanks, and then they kind of went belly up and just left. And that's leaching right into the river. And one of the things that this group has worked really hard on is that super fund that's supposed to clean up toxic sites like this, to get them to come in and clean it up. And Congresswoman Miller actually has legislation out there to get rid of that fund. That's, it's funny because over here she's like, protect the Ohio River. And over here she's like, yeah, we don't really care about the rest of them. The Mon's just as important. So
Yeah.
those are kind of like the two most immediate things. I don't know that people, and I meant to look it up. I'm a real numbers girl. But also keep in mind, even though I'm running for Congress, I call it my after school project. I also have my school project, which is my job that, pays the mortgage and puts the kids through college. And there doesn't seem to be enough minutes in the day, but I know that West Virginia has a really high percentage of cancer rates. And PFAS increased cholesterol, increased kidney cancer, I think increased testicular cancer. Like they're really, really bad. And then when we look at places like over in Berkeley County, we see where they're showing up like 2.5 times the normal blood in your body, like in your blood, 2.5 times the normal amount in your body. Like these are things that kind of feel really pressing to me that we need to do something. But yeah, I mean,
So sorry.
oh, sorry.
Just to help you out there for a minute, West Virginia has 498.1 per 100,000 people with cancer from 2018 to 2022, which is notably higher than the national average of 448.6. And that's according to the National Cancer Institute.
I wanted to look and didn't get a chance to see if cancer rates are higher along these contaminated waterways. Like I know Weirton was having a lot of trouble. My daughters ran cross country all through high school, and one of them through college. And every time we went down toward Parkersburg, to where all the industry is along the river, instant asthma attack.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time. And I mean, to the point where there were times where we had to go to Camden Clark. Okay, every race we ended up at Camden Clark. And, one of the things they said were these microparticles in the air from all the industry. Like, I just really want to prioritize cleaning up the water. The other thing, too, is I think that as part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, West Virginia was supposed to get a large chunk of money. And I think that money is in jeopardy. I would want to solidify that. It's at least 18 billion. And, they estimate just drinking water, not cleaning up water, but just fixing our drinking water, especially in the southern coal fields, would cost about 18 billion. So like, why are we not fighting harder for that money? Why are we saying it's okay to claw it back?
Yeah, absolutely. To follow up on one of your earlier points as well, I spoke with Mike Jones of West Virginia Rivers Coalition in a previous episode, and I can't remember the exact number, but I believe it was something like 8 or 9% of all drinking water in the United States originates in watersheds in the Mon National Forest. So that is an incredibly important area.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And your point about the industry along the river. Like my mom's dad died of leukemia from working for Bayer for forever. And that's not an uncommon story. But all of those chemicals being that close to the river, obviously, how could it not be contaminated in some way? Or like you think of East Palestine, that terrible spill. Like if this wall wasn't here, you could see the Ohio right now. The river turned this very lovely shade of like a jade green for a couple of days. And it's like how I'm sure there were some fines levied for that stuff, but
But that's a smack on the wrist.
yes, those companies budget that into. So and when I work in oil and gas again, and there are companies out there, I'm not saying anything about any particular one, where they just factor that into their budget. Like, oh, we're going to absorb this amount of fines, we're going to do this amount of damage, and that just is what it is. There are also companies who try to do a good job, but it's not all of them by any stretch.
I took a geology class many years ago, and we traveled with a mine inspector, and we went to different mine sites in different phases of reclamation. And that was, 20 years ago. He said, yeah, a lot of these companies just factor in the fine, and it's actually cheaper for them to pay the fine than to remediate the land.
Mm-hmm.
We have this lifetime, this lifetime of exploitation where out-of-state interests and opportunists come in and they take what they want and they leave. Timber, coal, oil, gas. Now it's water, and out in the Eastern Panhandle, it's farmland. Like, this is it is a cycle of abuse. And it's well past time for us to stand up and say, you know what? No. You want these resources, you're going to pay for them. You're going to compensate. When I was growing up, we always knew what side of the road the coal trucks ran heavy on, because that was the side of the road that was, broken down and potted. Well, now it's the sand trucks going to, the other morning I passed like 22 or 23. When my girls were younger, we used to make it a game to count how many sand trucks we could pass on the way to school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in our roads, we are at rock bottom in infrastructure for roads, and that flows back into, everything flows into the water. That reminds me of that little kids movie Nemo, where they're like, all drains lead to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
All of the brine that we're pouring on, or putting in and salt we're putting on our roads in the winter, the first heavy rain, that's right into the watershed.
Mm-hmm.
All of our drains and debris right into the watershed. Like, we need to do a better job protecting the water.
Yeah. My grandpa always jokes. He still uses the name Arch Moore because he's 80, but he always says he's going to send Arch Moore a bill for wearing out the seat of his pants because all the roads are so bad and he's bouncing around all the time.
It's insane. When I'm stumping, everybody kind of laughs, but it's true. 2/3 of West Virginians live in unincorporated communities like me, where potholes outnumber paychecks and we're afraid to drink the water. And I'm like, that's not a talking point. That's our reality. And it's a shame. I call this season most people say April showers bring May flowers, but I call it, is it a pothole or a mud puddle?
Yeah.
I don't know. Might be. Ooh.
Yeah. I work with, this is a little bit of a tangent, but that's okay. I work with a lot of people from sort of the Pittsburgh metro area because my company's based out of Pittsburgh. And it's always funny when we go to West Virginia to, first of all, see what actually qualifies as a road, because sometimes a road is an abandoned state road that somebody's four-wheeler path through their yard. But sometimes there is an oil pad at the end of those, so you have to drive back those to get there. But then, people always why are the roads so bad? And then I sound like this crazy, tinfoil hat guy because I'm like, oh, all the roads are owned by the state. There's no county in Bubba. I just,
there was a time where, and I don't know that legislation passed, but the roads are designed to hold 60,000 pounds. The interstate, I think, is 80. They wanted to make our weight limit 90,000. The road is only for, I have to double check the numbers, but the road's only for 60. And you saw where other states had done this and spent an exponential amount of money the next year in road repair because it's just not designed for that. I'm like, we don't, fix the roads we have. Yesterday, I posted something that I kind of thought about and crunched the numbers, was that, gas prices are so high right now. It's like 56 cents a gallon is to tax. If we went 1 month without paying taxes at the pump between state and federal taxes, it wouldn't make a difference because we named our potholes years ago. Nobody's fixing them anyway. The argument is, oh, this will slow down road repair. And I'm like, sure.
Yeah, my favorite is when the road slips and they just put a stop sign on either side of the slip.
Yeah. We had a road kind of start to slip. And I mean, this was over the course of years, but they put a big barrel in it. And then
Mm-hmm.
eventually the barrel was level with the roads. They
Yep.
just stuck a cone on top of the barrel. And I was like, it's a West Virginia wildflower.
Yep. Yeah, I see that all over the place. So let's move on to some more like national issues. So public lands is something that I think is really important right now, that not enough people are talking about. So can you start by just talking about sort of the importance of public lands, how you see it just generally, and then into West Virginia as well?
I think the big thing with our public lands is what used to be free recreation, right? But it's really about conservation. If you have $100 in the bank, you don't spend $100, right? Um, and I like to think of our public lands as our investment in our future. It's for a better day, and I worry, I'm a big national parks advocate. I worry that this moved to strip public lands of their protections for logging and mining and all of that is going to snowball kind of out of control. I think I read somewhere the other day, like 90 million acres have already been stripped of their protection. And all of our public lands, all of our national forests, all of our even our state or national parks, even our state parks, they all have something wonderful to offer. Um, and it just would be a real injustice to me, I think personally, if we stripped them for more whatever. I just cannot fathom why we would want to like clear cut the Mon forest or things like that. Like why would we want to do that? And why people champion for things that we know are going to be harmful. Like I was reading about the 30% by 30, like by 2030 they want to like shrink the number of public lands by 30%. Um or just overturning, I don't know, the Antiquities Act. Like, these things they don't make sense to me.
Hmm. Yeah. So, first of all, like a lot of the argument behind public land sell off is like it doesn't make financial sense. Like we've got all this debt and we've got all this money or this land that they see as unproductive. The Secretary of the Interior a couple weeks ago called the people who are opposing public land sell offs financially illiterate. I probably would classify as financially illiterate, but even I know that if you have some sort of budget issue, what you don't want to do is, unless you absolutely have to, is sell your assets because those are the things that are making you money. And we have we make money on public lands. We also have these incredible resources stored on public lands that like I think that there could be use cases for like, okay, we need to mine here or we need to timber here for like really extreme issues of like national security or something like that. But I don't know that right now. Well, I do know. I know that right now isn't the right time to pull the ripcord. Like
Okay.
if we
Well,
want to settle the national debt, we need to start spending less and start paying down on the debt. Like so I think
amen.
all of that is just I'm sorry I keep cutting you off. I think all
Oh,
of that is just
no. I was
correct.
actually looking up the number while you were talking. National parks put 55.6 billion into our economy, and for every $1 we spend, we get $10 back. Like
Yeah.
that makes economic sense to me,
Hmm.
but I think it comes down to the right people. People aren't making money. It's all about money.
Yeah, well, and there is something to be said for forest management. And like something you will hear on the other side is that like it's really hard to get anything done management wise in a national forest. And like a lot of these, like we need more like early successional habitat, for example, for things like grouse, which have declined really, really badly
Have
in
they?
most of Appalachia. And those things may be true, but a lot of the times people make that argument and then, the argument will be like, well, we need to be more efficient and more and quicker and more effective. And the problem with that is those are code words for we want to get what we want to get done really fast. They're good at pointing out problems, but their solutions aren't actually solutions. Their solutions are line their pockets. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
It's like this insatiable it's insatiable, the desire, I think, to make more money whether
Mhm.
it's off of public lands, whether it's off of, you know, our water. It's just like this insatiable desire for more and more and more. And when is it going to be enough? When
Right.
there's nothing left? I don't know. It's the same in education. There's a big move to privatize it, and you hear things like, "Oh, competition will make it better," but nobody's really talking about the things that actually go on in the classroom.
Right.
Like 1 in 4 children live in poverty. I have students who can't afford pencils.
Mm.
I have students who don't know where they're going to sleep tonight and who we pack their food to go home. Like these are like everything is just so multidimensional and interconnected. And the linear arguments against these things. Well, you don't understand economics if you don't want to sell the public land. Well, you don't understand the ecosystem and environment if you do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, and not every there are other factors to be considered besides economic factors, ecological factors, social factors. Like I have so many really treasured memories with my family on public land. We went to Glacier National Park for my honeymoon.
Oh, wow.
With like I was talking about my pap earlier. He's going to be 80 this year. We go to Mon National Forest a couple times a year, normally to Spruce Knob Lake because that's one of the only places that he can still get around anymore and fish, and fish there. And there is literally not an amount of money that you could offer me to make up for that. So I think a lot of those factors get lost.
Oh, I was thinking about another public land I love is Seneca Rocks.
Hmm.
It's just you said memories. It's just I just I feel like as West Virginian, a love of this land has to be born into you. And I'm sure I'm sure everybody, Ohio, wherever you go, everybody loves their land. Our daughter lives in Pittsburgh now, and I mean, I thought West Virginians were passionate, but man, there's Yinzingers, I think they call themselves, or Yinzers, they're
Yinzers,
really
yeah.
passionate. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, Wheeling's a weird place. I always say it's like Pittsburgh had sex with Kentucky because it's like half Rust Belt and half Appalachia. So I get all of that. But yeah, well, in West Virginia, there's just the reality. Like I was talking with someone else about this the other day that like we're all so isolated. I mean, obviously there are people that live in cities, but like a lot of the residents, like I don't think people understand what it's like that like it's going to take you an hour to get to a Walmart, or if you have to call the fire department, it's going to take them 45 minutes to get there. And guess what? If it just rained or there's 3 inches of snow on the ground, like they're just not coming. And it breeds the self-reliance and sort of a dependence on a dependence and appreciation for the land because you're so intimately connected to it.
you know, I love Wheeling. My dad is actually from Wheeling, though. I grew up in Marion County, but my daughter just lived there for 4 years to go to undergraduate school at Wheeling University.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to go back and forth, and it really is that kind of in between Pittsburgh and Ohio, well, I wouldn't say Kentucky. We'll say Pittsburgh and Ohio. That's the thing too. My grandpa used to love to go on these big drives, and we would leave and we'd go up 250 through like 100 and Littleton and Cameron and weave our way. He had relatives up in Weirton. And sometimes we were just like dropping off a tool. My great uncle wanted to borrow. Sometimes we were just visiting friends and having ice cream and whatnot. But he called that the Steel Road once you hit. So it was 250 to Cameron, and then it became automatically the Steel Road. Now it's like the Husky Highway, the Hornet Highway, but it's all still the same. My husband and I drove that a couple weeks ago, and it just was really sad to me what I remember as my childhood and what it is now. You know,
Yeah.
and again, along the Ohio, like it should be pretty bustling, but I think it has to be bustling in the right way. And so close to Pittsburgh. I mean,
Hmm.
I had forgotten how close Weirton was to Pittsburgh. I don't know that I would do that commute if I, but I mean, I really hate that tunnel with a passion. But
Yeah. Yeah, the city's rough. So, another thing that's in the news, I don't know how much you've paid attention to it. If you haven't, I can just maybe tell you a little bit about it. But so the Forest Service last week announced they're restructuring. They're moving their headquarters to Salt Lake City.
I did not read
Public,
that.
yeah, there was a public comment period. And by the Forest Service own admission, 82% of their comments were against it. From what I've read, virtually no one in the Forest Service was actually asking for this. But Utah, as it turns out, is sort of the most anti-public land state in the nation. Senator Mike Lee, I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a senator from Utah, and he is the one who is always leading the charge if there's going to be like a push for a public land sell-off. They're also closing the regional offices. So there was 9 regional offices. Those will be closed. They're moving to a state model where there would be like 15 state offices. Obviously, most of those offices are responsible for multiple states. They're also closing, I think 57, over 50 of their research centers, including the one in Princeton, West Virginia. So, now they would argue, the proponents of this would argue that like most of the forest land is in the West, so they're moving to there to be closer to that. I would rebut that with, first of all, you're moving to Utah. That seems very intentional because their state government is so anti-public land as well. And also like the Forest Service management, like the highest levels of management need to be in DC so they can be held accountable by our government. And also the thing is, there's going to be like institutional knowledge loss. There's going to be a lot of people sort of pushed into early retirement or people who just don't want to make the move to wherever the new office is and is going to quit. And it feels like a really intentional kind of neutering of that public service. So there are things like that going on that make me very worried about the future of our public lands. So with all that being said, how would you fight to protect our public lands in Congress?
Wow. I didn't realize all of that was going on. I knew that we stripped a lot of jobs. We use the term doged.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that all happened last year as well.
Yeah. I knew that we doged about, gosh, I want to say from the Bureau of Land Management, was it like 800 jobs?
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot.
BLM is separate from the Forest Service, but the Forest Service got cut significantly too. Yeah.
I think we need to put it to legislate. First off, a lot of things come back to Congress needs to reclaim their authority on a lot of things. This isn't like a new fight. This is decades long of Congress kind of going, okay, you can handle that. Okay, you can handle that. But now it's almost as if they've relinquished all power to the executive branch. I think, one thing that we would need to do is to fight to reclaim that power. And then I think we need to make sure that there are some protections for that. It's, if 82% of what's the point of a public forum if 82% of the people that respond say, no, we're not going to do this. And the department says, no, we don't want to do this, but we do it anyway. Like, I think that we need to maybe look at how that process works and really put some caveats in there. I'm going to have to read about that tonight. Yeah. I had no idea.
Well, in the Forest Service in particular, there's, let's see here, there's 1.13 million acres of federally owned public land in West Virginia. The vast majority of that is under the Forest Service care. And then, of course, there's, I think, the Bluestone National Scenic River and New River Gorge are obviously, they're under National Park Service. There might be a couple other managers in there too, but that in particular, like that's going to have downstream effects on West Virginia, like certainly. And we can argue about what those might be, but it's going to have an impact. So
it's just, it's a real shame to me that it has come to that. And some people might argue, like, do you really need as much Forest Service? But I mean, yeah, the national parks, I think they had cut a substantial cut too. And the argument that I keep hearing is, well, it's like when we were when some of the government was in shutdown, and they were like, well, these jobs are, it's working just fine without them. That's because somebody was working for free at those jobs, right? And that's because now people are carrying an extra workload at the jobs that remain. I think that's going to be a real tragedy. And I think we're going to see a lot of negative fallout. And again, why? Like, if nobody wants it, then why does it have to happen? Which I think the old adage is somebody's nephew or somebody, somebody lobbied for it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and, I would argue as well that there's like a difference with a system might be able to like perform the basic functions of said system with like a skeleton crew of people. But like certainly, like in the case of the Forest Service, like people want to complain all the time, as I said earlier, about like the lack of management and how it's not being handled right in early successional habitat and things like that. That's certainly not going to get any better with less money and less people.
No, and just surviving on a skeleton crew is not the same as a thriving department.
Right, exactly.
And honestly, I really hate the word fair. I've used it so much today in these other interviews, but there is a fairness to work. What you sign up to do and to carry the workload of say 2 positions, that's not equitable, and it's certainly not efficient.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Something that I was thinking about PFAS earlier. West Virginia is in the top 10 for low birth weight. And PFAS actually, one of the things besides, thyroid cancer and liver problems and cholesterol and all that, they can actually lead to low birth weight. And I'm kind of just saying this aloud because I want to make a mental note to go check to see if there's any studies correlating that. I mean, I doubt it.
Yeah, PFAS are really interesting to me. I'm going to try not to go on a rant because this is a real tangent and frankly not super relevant to this show, but are very interesting to me because on one hand you have people talking about I have an autistic son, just for some context. You have people talking about, well, we have to find the cause of autism. There's got to be some sort of, it's not just genetic, there's got to be some sort of external factor causing autism. It's got to be vaccines or Tylenol or whatever the hell. And the
Whatever the child
reality
can do.
is there are chemicals that do have some correlation with autism, and they don't like guarantee you're going to get autism, but that along with a very complicated genetic mosaic, they can increase your risk. Forever chemicals are in that list. So like we're shaking our fist about like, oh, Tylenol and vaccines and then we're completely ignoring this other thing. And it really frustrates me as a parent of an autistic person because they want to parade around how much they care about autism. And there are real concrete factors that may be factoring into it that would support the argument that they're making. And they
Right.
just ignore it because it's not part of their platform for whatever reason.
It
So
doesn't fit their talking point.
yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now because I could get really wound up about that.
No, I think so many of the health problems that we have are environmental. Our own daughters have autoimmune diseases we never heard of. I mean, my oldest daughter has Ehlers-Danlos. It's a hypermobility connective tissue disease. And it took 6 years to get to diagnosis. And I mean that's also a reflection on healthcare in West Virginia. But like it's just we're definitely leading the way in things like autoimmune disease and things like cancer and like we have to step back and say, is this environmental?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. It's very frustrating. And I get that a lot of it is intentional misinformation for whatever reason. It doesn't fit their talking point or it doesn't fit their profit margin or whatever. But we have to live this life and we need to have like this
There it is. Yep.
truth. Just be honest with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and sorry, that reminded me of something else. A very good point I heard expressed by RFK Jr. of all people is that this when allow corporations to pollute our waters and take advantage of our land and our natural resources in that way, that's actually a form of subsidy. And there's these people who are very, very fiscally conservative who are against handouts and things like that. And what we are actually doing is we are incurring increased healthcare costs. It's degrading our waters. We have more costs associated with mitigating this damage, with cleaning our drinking water, et cetera, et cetera. And all these costs are costs that are being transferred to us by whoever it is that is degrading these resources in that way. So we are essentially allowing them to take advantage of that, and we incur those costs as a result.
I went down to a community forum in Tucker County, to circle back to the data centers, right? And they asked the state of West Virginia for 2 studies, an environmental impact study and a hydrology study. And they said, the DEP said, no, you don't need it, right? So they crowdfunded just a study. And the forum I went to, the presenters were presenting their data. And one was, I believe, from MIT and the other maybe from Harvard. And the only thing that they examined was going to be the rise in pollution from the microgrid diesel fuel power plant that would have to be installed so that they could have the data center, right?
Mm.
And it was going to, I think it was $31 million of anticipated extra medical debt to the residents from the air pollution alone, and a possibility of an additional 2 deaths a year. And the argument is, well, it's just 2 deaths, right? But who is it? Is it
Yeah.
your mom? Is it your child? Is it your neighbor? Like, 2 is just too damn many. But we're expected to champion a data center that's going to take a potentially 5 million gallons of water a day out of the system. And I have to tell you, I have both this love of kayaking, and it's kind of funny because this fear of water, they don't really go hand in hand, right? So there's not a lot of places that I'm willing to kayak, but the Chi is one of them. And that has been my longstanding. I have a summer birthday, mom's birthday present. We all just take a day and we go down to trips around Thomas and Davis, and we kayak the Chi, and we like have a great time. So like I love Tucker County. But I went to this, and I just was thinking, like, we're asking these people whose whole livelihood is that little chunk of tourism right there to incur a medical debt. And I'm sure that Tucker falls into one of these healthcare deserts where you're going to have to drive hours to get healthcare. And B, I mean, just the noise pollution and the light pollution. And everybody's like, oh, these will be so many jobs. It may be for the first year while they're building it, but then it's like 10 jobs forever.
Yeah.
And who knows if they're even good paying jobs.
Right. Yeah.
Tucker, Berkeley, they're all like fighting tooth and nail against these data centers. And then they're like, hey, guess what? Google's coming to Putnam. And I don't believe that any of them are for West Virginians, which comes back to that we are always the extraction colony. I was down in Jefferson County for a Meet the Candidates kind of event. And it was really both very sweet and one of my favorite things so far. These 2 ladies, it was nonpartisan. These 2 ladies came up and they're like, hey, do you have time to go on a field trip? And I was like, well, just don't murder me. No, but, it was like a joke. A Democrat, Republican, and an independent get in a car, right? But we drove around, and they drove me to these solar fields where they have taken that farmland and they have cut the topsoil off and sold the topsoil because it's extremely valuable. And as far as the eye can see, it's just solar fields. So now the Shenandoah is running with clay, and all of that electricity powers Loudoun County, Virginia. Like, none of it is I think it's actually forbidden to sell that electric here for whatever reason. But like, I have a strong suspicion all of these data centers, because they're all on that border, they're not for us. And it's just, at what point are we going to say enough is enough?
Yeah. Yeah, the Tucker one, it's just mind-boggling to me because it's like arguably the tourist like epicenter of the state, and they're just gonna put a giant, like, there's so many other things. Like, if you were going to build something there, like I said earlier, build a Walmart. You know what I mean? There's so many other things that would be a better investment in the community and would help that tourist.
Anything else?
Yeah. But it's just crazy. One thing that concerns me as an outdoorsman is, so, we've been talking all about issues that threaten conservation, that threaten wild places and wild things. And frankly, most of these things we've talked about come primarily from the right, but there are movements in other places. Colorado just instituted this, well, they're going through the process of instituting this crazy fur trapping ban that like isn't, it's half a fur trapping ban, half isn't. It's this really weird thing. And again, like, there was a huge amount of public pushback. Like, the majority of public opinion was negative on this. They went through with it anyways. There's a ballot initiative in Oregon. I'm not sure if they have enough signatures yet,
the way it works out there is they just have to get enough signatures on a petition, and this rule bill, I guess, would go to a vote, but it would basically outlaw harming an animal in any, like, it would outlaw farming, hunting, basically anything. Now, obviously that's not going to pass, but it is sort of an effort to change public opinion just a little bit, just incrementally in that way. And the organizers of these things have admitted as much. Like, we don't expect it to pass. We're trying to gradually push things this way. You look at places like Washington, which have eliminated hunting seasons for different predators. So I see, like, on both sides, these pushes to threaten sort of this out, particularly hunting and fishing, where in my mind. So, and it worries me that, like, I'm going to get caught in the middle, and either way, something's going to happen. And 20 years from now, that's just not going to be something that we do. Maybe fishing, but like hunting is going to be something we talk about that people used to do. So, can you talk a little bit about your opinion on hunting and fishing, on those traditions, and then, like, well, yeah, let's just start there.
All right, I have to preface with I've only been hunting twice.
Well, you don't have to be a hunter to have an opinion about it.
That was probably in high school or college, and I don't think I was very good at it. But, I live in a place where now fishing, like, I've been fishing since I could cast a line. I grew up by a railroad trestle, so, like, that's all you did was fish off of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I live in a place where hunting is very much part of tradition and part of the fabric of who we are. I mean, we don't have school the first week of hunting season, and fortunately it coincides with Thanksgiving because we don't have enough teachers and bus drivers.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the argument that we don't want to be unkind to the animals. I get that. I'm a huge animal lover. Just thinking about these 2 baby raccoons we nursed once. I get that from my mom, I think. But at the same time too, we know things like, and I really, this is not my wheelhouse. So I can't go too deep into it. But I know, like, there's also things like wasting disease that the deer get. That we do have to, to think about those types of management. The more we encroach their territory and vice versa. And I mean, people where I live, they're eating every bit of the deer that they can. It's not a wasteful death. But I can also be open-minded and see the other side of the argument too. I don't see that ever happening here. And I don't know enough about Ohio, but I can't imagine that Ohio is that much different.
No, I mean, yeah, right now, I don't know. I just worry that as if public opinion were to shift nationally, some things might change.
It may shift, but I don't think it would ever shift quite that much to make it like a national ban.
Yeah.
I mean, the big joke here is that we can eat our roadkill. I've never known a single person that does it. Like, not a single person. But
That eats roadkill? Sorry, my dog was
yeah.
running around upset.
Yeah, so I don't know.
I think I've eaten a roadkill turkey before. I don't think the problem with deer is if you hit them, you just ruin the vast majority of the meat, and it's not really worth your time a lot of the time.
Now listen, nobody hits a deer, they hit you.
Yeah, that's a good point. So all right, we'll end with this. Endangered Species Act has currently been in the news. I don't know if you have kept up with that at all.
A little bit. I saw where, we're going to waive it so that we can drill in the Gulf. We're like, yeah,
So,
don't worry about that.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little more background too. So there is, last week, the Endangered Species Council, I believe it's called, the Endangered Species Committee, met. I think they've given like 3 or 4 exemptions before in history for specific projects to the Endangered Species Act. And they were for, as I said, they were for specific, like, this very specific thing is worth potential harm to this specific animal. What they did last week was unprecedented in that they met. It took them about 15 minutes. And Pete Hegseth was involved as well because it was supposedly an issue of national security, an issue that was largely generated by an entirely voluntary war that we elected to get ourselves into. But the argument they made is that for national security reasons, for our ability to access oil and gas, they were waiving environmental species protections in the Gulf of Mexico as it pertains to oil and gas exploration. Not a particular well we want to drill, not Exxon came to them and said, hey, we've got this project we want to exempt this species from. They just waived a blanket protection. What are your comments or thoughts on that?
Well, it's probably going to be a lot. So, first off, we know how successful the the Endangered Species Act is, right? I think it's 99% of all species that we listed in critical or endangered has been saved in the 50 years that has been enacted. The thing that I kind of it frustrates me that they're saying it's national security, right? But also too, I know that we haven't, and I need to fact check the year. We haven't brought an oil refinery online since either 1972 or 1977. At the same time, despite hundreds of, millions, if not billions of dollars, in subsidies to these companies, those refineries that we have were never designed to process and refine our oil. Like I think the largest oil exporter, but at the same time we have to go buy other people's oils because we can't process our own oil. If this were a real national security or a real energy independence, in my eye, is a real concern, wouldn't we caveat, like, we'll keep giving you these subsidies, but you need to build and design oil refineries that refine our oil? To me, that makes, well, honestly, the most sense. I'm big about common sense solutions and common sense government. On the flip side of that, I just don't think that anybody wants to see a species go extinct. I think it's about the poor dodo birds. I always tell this story, like the dodo birds need no predators, right? So, so when the colonists landed, they were just like, hey, George, what's up? And they just kind of waddled up and we were like, hey, they taste like chicken. So we ate like all of the dodo birds. But how do we know if one of these species doesn't hold the cure for cancer or doesn't hold, isn't just so vital? And everything evolves, I think, for a reason. And it's a real tragedy to me that we would just be like, well, I think I was reading about it, but the article I read called that committee the God Council, because there's a species that, well, there's only like 20 of them that, we know is going to die or to become extinct.
The Rice's whale, I'm not sure the exact numbers, but they're pretty critically low and it will have impacts on them, they're expecting.
And, at the same time, they're pushing through all these amendments to kind of change how we define a species as endangered and also how we are going to constitute a critical habitat.
Mm-hmm.
When they were working on the pipeline in Excel, there was a big push to actually take some species off the endangered species list for the same reason. I think it circles back to, when is it ever going to be enough? And if it's really a matter of national security, then why are we not really truly doing some things to move toward energy independence?
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, to your earlier points, off the top of my head, I know there's a breast cancer medication based on the venom of copperhead snakes. I know that, what's the weight loss drug that's become really popular? Not
Ozempic.
So that was somehow derived from Gila monster venom in some way. And there are various other examples of this, as you said, like translational science, like these organisms could hold some sort of potentially useful breakthrough that could be beneficial to humankind. Beyond that, I don't know if you know who Aldo Leopold is. I talk about him on this show a ton. He basically invented the field of wildlife conservation. Like that literally wasn't a field. And he was the first professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison to be a game management professor. He wrote an incredible book called Sand County Almanac. You should check it out if you hadn't read it. But
I'm writing it down.
one of his quotes is the first rule of intelligent tinkering is to not throw away all the parts, meaning that we have impacted every square inch of this planet at this point, even the most remote areas, like through climate change and air pollution and thing we have. And so, like, with that being the case, that is the tinkering that we're doing, and eliminating any species, no matter how inconsequential it may or may not seem, could have incredible downstream effects. I mean, like, you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with passenger pigeons. Um,
Yes, yes.
but you know, they used to literally take flocks so big they would take days to pass over. They would look like rivers in the sky allegedly. And now, like, there have been huge effects because they would land, their flocks would be so big and they would land, they would actually snap off trees, and there would be like essentially small clear cuts in the forest where they had landed and nested. They also ate tons of hard mass like acorns and chestnuts and things, which chestnut trees are another thing that we've lost. And so there, a certain amount of the sort of ecological problems we're dealing with today is because of the elimination of passenger pigeons. And who's to say that any other species couldn't, the loss of any other species couldn't have a similar impact.
You know, it just I don't know how to articulate it. So Copernicus was this astronomer, right? And for many years we believed that the universe was geocentric, that circled around us. And I believe Copernicus was the first to say, no, 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 I'm in charting this. I'm pretty sure we orbit the sun. We're heliocentric. And everybody was like, no, no, no. We are the best. We are geocentric. And sometimes I feel like we have that geocentrism where we're like everything has to be about us. And it just doesn't. And I think when we talk about the environment and things like that, we need to be cognizant, like, how interconnected we are, and beyond these things might benefit us later, like they're a natural part of our earth, and shouldn't we want to save that?
Yeah.
It just That's kind of how I feel.
Mhm.
You could
So
make the religious argument too, like these creatures were evolved by God for a reason. I just don't understand why we're so hell bent to make everything about us.
yeah, the religious argument is really interesting to me because a lot of people on the other side would say that God gave us dominion over the earth, and so we can kind of do what we want with it. Which my rebuttal would be two things. If you believe God gave human dominions over the earth, then he gave it to all humans. He didn't just give it to the ones living on the planet right now. So
And
if
but we're
we split
also
that
called to be
up,
good stewards.
right. And the other thing is, like, do you think he gave it to us so we could just look? I'm trying not to swear, just not completely ravage it. Like, if
That's
your
why
parents,
you have $100. You don't spend it all, right?
right?
You
Yeah.
gotta save more for later.
Hmm. Yeah. Like, if your parents gave you a new car and you took it out and ran it into a telephone pole, you could be like, well, you gave it to me. It's like, well, yeah, but
I think it's important to one of the things, like, we tried to teach our daughters, and I really do, I mean, they're both great humans, is that we always want to leave something better than we found it. Like, if we would go to Valley Falls on a picnic and we're picking up our stuff and there's trash around, we pick it up too.
Mhm.
One of the things that we did during COVID lockdown was that we walked the road down below and we picked up all of the trash that, wasn't our trash to pick up. But the other thing too is that whenever any decision is made, I I think that we should ask ourselves, like, does this, like, for me personally, I make no qualm about it. I am in this race for a better West Virginia and a better West Virginia alone. Like, you know, I've seen the people of my state suffer my entire life through for other people's wealth and gain, and I'm kind of over it. So you have to say, how does this help West Virginians? How does this help Americans? And if it doesn't help, like, as the whole, if it's just, this 1% or this 2%, then we really need to step back and say, all right, what are we doing here? And if it is not for the greater good, and at this point in my life, I think the next generation, um, then we need to seriously reevaluate it. Like, that's just all there is to it. And that's, I mean, that's kind of who I am in a nutshell. I'm not like super old, but I'm in my 40s and I feel like I'm halfway there. And I know that the decisions I make, I may not have to live with, but somebody else will. And I want to make sure that they're good decisions.
Yeah, I agree completely.